So this is a video that's been on my backlog for a long time. It's something that I wanted to do a reaction video for, and I just kind of never got around to it. But I will warn you, it's gonna be a long one. So get yourself a snack, maybe a drink, sit down because we've got some stuff to talk about. This video is called Why Isn't Gaming Fun Anymore? It's made by the Pie Face, and we're gonna see if there's any insight into why I'm feeling this way. Video came out a little around a year ago, so let's check it out.
Listen, guys, here's the thing. I'm old. I have gray hairs.
Not
There's
me.
one thing that's been in my life since my hair was short and full of color.
Okay, well, my hair
That's
is
video
short
games.
and full of color, but
But recently, I've realized that I spend a lot more time consuming content about video games than I do actually playing video games. In fact, in the
relatable.
past couple of years, there's been months at a time where I did not play a single minute of video games. And it most certainly is not because I'm a busy and accomplished adult with a roaring career and social life, because quite the opposite. My life mostly revolves around watching YouTube videos, streams, and shows, but I actively miss playing video games and spending countless hours.
So I will say, for me personally, it feels like these days I'm only ever playing games out of some sort of twisted sense of spite. Um, Never because I actually want to play the game or anything. Like, it feels almost like an obligation, which is not fun. And it's not all the time, of course. There are times where I do. Well, I have to like force myself to play games that I already know I'm going to like, which usually means playing games that I've played since I was a kid. Um, it's not a great feeling, really.
Immersing myself in creative worlds and game systems, and it seems like I'm the only one with this problem.
Oh
All of
my
my friends
gosh,
still have the
yes.
games that they're obsessed with and play all the time. I personally don't enjoy most of those games since apparently I'm a boomer that hates games now. So what's the deal? Am I growing out of this hobby that I've loved for so long? Or perhaps I'm just jaded from the infestation of corporate greed and its insatiable hunger for infinite growth afflicted upon us at every corner, in every game, with cash shops and battle passes, so many
Facts.
battle passes, and
Sing it.
coins, and the crystals
Preach.
you have to buy, and the
Keep
crystals,
going.
you don't get the right amount of crystals, and it doesn't make
Sing
sense
it.
for all the items
Yep.
in the shop because you have a little left over because they want you to spend more money. Or maybe games are just bad now. Or is it some other nuanced collection of reasons that I'm going to spend the rest of this video exploring and talking about? Yeah, no, games are definitely just bad now.
They are. Oh my gosh, they are. Guys, I just got done explaining to someone that they could literally put a $60 price tag on a rock and somehow people would still buy it. You guys need to chill. Every time something new gets announced, you're like, oh my gosh, this game is going to be so good. It's going to be great. It's totally going to be worth the price. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, what in the heck is wrong with you? What happened to the gray matter inside of your skull to make you think that? Anyway, I won't get into that. We'll let him do it this time. Good music.
It was the early 90s. One of
Hell
my
yeah.
earliest, most vivid memories of video games was the Christmas that I got a Super Nintendo. I got this Mickey Mouse game called The Magical Quest, starring Mickey Mouse. I remember just laying down in my living room for hours playing on my little CRT TV. It was like crack to my tiny little underdeveloped brain, just seeing pixels moving at my command. I was hooked. And that was it. The floodgates were open. Throwing Foot Clan ninjas into the screen in Turtles of Time, collecting all the letters in Donkey Kong Country,
Heck yeah.
Koopas.
in Super Mario World, solving puzzles with all the cool items and the Link to the Past, that kick-ass intro in Super Metroid. I was hyped and stressed out of my little mind for that. This era was peak gaming.
Bro,
Forever
Kirby
solidified me
on
as a
Game
Nintendo
Boy?
fanboy.
Ah,
But then, a few years later, the most fateful day of any kid growing up in the mid-90s, the Christmas where I got my It was that sick ass green one.
I didn't have an
bundled with
N64.
Donkey Kong 64 and that little RAM pack. But now games were 3D.
I
Donkey
had
Kong,
portable
Mario,
Nintendo
Zelda, all
consoles,
had an
but
entirely
primarily
new
grew up with
dimension
like
to explore.
Sony
Opened up
home
so many
consoles.
gameplay
Oh, well, we had
options.
Sega
But that
first.
wasn't all, because you could play with 4 players. Mario Kart, Mario Party, Smash Bros. The rise of party games. You could sit on the couch with your friends, smacking controllers out of each other's hands, accuse them of cheating, ruin friendships. It was great. But party games weren't the only thing that benefited from the 4 controller slots.
I never got to
first-person
really.
shooters. My friends and I spent countless
I didn't get
hours
into
leveling this.
multiplayer first-person shooters until Xbox. I want to say, yeah, it was Xbox, original Xbox era with like stuff like Halo. It did. Let's see. So first of all, I should say that when I was coming up, I was actually too young to really enjoy the Sega Genesis, even though that's what my older sister had, and it's so long ago, but I still have a lot of memories that I probably shouldn't have. I rack my brain to try and hold on to these things, but I remember not being able to talk properly. And back then, in order to play a video game on those old CRT TVs, you had to basically solve the Da Vinci Code. So the Sega Genesis would actually hook into the VCR, which would hook into the TV. And in order to play it, you'd have to turn the TV to channel 2, turn on the VCR, and then turn on the Sega console. Of course, me being a little baby bunny, I couldn't say all of that. So all I could really do is she had her TV on top of a dresser, which was pretty tall, and then on top of that TV was the VCR, and on top of the VCR was the Sega. So I would point all the way up to the very, very top, and me, again, not being able to speak properly, I'd point to it and I'd say, Dida. What the heck is Dida? Well, come to find out that certain games, not all of them, when you started them up on the Sega Genesis, they would go Sega, and a white screen with the blue letters would flash across. So I was trying to say Sega, but I guess S was like D for me, so it was Dida instead. Obviously I couldn't play any of the games, but I really, really, really liked the flashing colors. But my sister really wasn't into video games as much as I was, and I wasn't able to express how much I was into them. So it was kind of like a very frustrating scenario of desperately trying to convey what I wanted and being unable to.
We even used to get cardboard boxes and tape them up to the screen to section it off so that you couldn't screen look. We took that shit very seriously. Now, by this time, first-person shooters already existed on PC, but I had the crappiest Dell that was cheap and out of date even for the late 90s, though I was still able to play bangers like Roller Coaster Tycoon, Age of Empires 2, StarCraft. I knew the PC was eventually going to be where it's at.
There was an old PC game that I don't remember the name of. I only remember that it was it was a side-scrolling platformer, and it has very like Egyptian themed, pixely, and it was on a floppy disk. And we lost that floppy disk, and I remember games like Hoover, I remember Descent and Descent 2, I remember Fury 3, but for the life of me, I cannot remember what that Egyptian themed side scrolling puzzle platformer thing was. And I have absolutely no way of where to even start to look that up.
For me. But for now, the next
I hate
console era
that.
was upon us.
Wow, you just straight up skipped PlayStation and went right into GameCube, huh?
I really feel like there was 2 games in particular that defined this generation for me personally. The first game was Smash Bros. There were so many more characters
I
in the
did
first
not
game,
care for
so many
Smash
more
Brothers.
stages. It controlled beautifully. It was a masterpiece.
When it came to
One time, my
GameCube,
parents
me and
made
my
us go
friends
play
just
outside,
wanted
and so we
to.
stuck the TV up against the window and threw the controllers out there, and so we were all just standing outside playing Smash Bros. Through a window. And the second game was Time Splitters 2.
I
From the
do
same
remember Time
developers of
Splitters.
GoldenEye, Time Splitters would become my favorite shooter to
Time
this
Splitters was
day.
fun.
The game had an insane amount of game modes, tons of characters, a map editor that you make your own story missions. It had it all. One of my friends was a genius when it came to making maps, and every time we got together, he had a couple new maps that had some interesting gimmick that completely changed the way we would play the game. One of my favorite maps of his was one where it was just this square. It was like a grid of rooms with doors, and we would run around with one shot, one kill baseball bats. It was terrifying. If you've never played Time Splitters, I'm sorry, you're really
Yeah,
missing
you
out.
really did miss out. Time Splitters was a
The era
jam.
of couch gaming would not last forever, though, and in fact, it was soon coming to a close. Monday, March 15th, 2004.
Don't say Xbox. Oh, RuneScape. I didn't care for RuneScape. I played Gaia Online and MapleStory. Dream of Mirror Online, S4 League.
This was the day that I created my first RuneScape account. It would be my first introduction into the world of MMOs, the genre that encapsulated everything that I loved about gaming.
Okay, let's address that he skipped over PlayStation, he skipped over Game Boy, didn't mention... When did the PSP come out? Pretty much all handhelds were disregarded, and Sony was not mentioned. So he grew up with Nintendo, and then just went straight into MMO.
The adventure,
That's a
the
shame.
immersion,
There were a lot of good
puzzle solving,
PlayStation
crafting,
games.
and I could play and enjoy it with my friends and hundreds of people across the
Also, he mentioned GameCube, but he didn't mention the biggest game that everyone wanted the GameCube for, and that is Phantasy Star Online Episode 1 and 2. I didn't have a GameCube, but I had one vicariously through like all of my friends, and we played that game till our brain... People talk about Call of Duty giving them brain rot. No. It was Phantasy Star Episode 1 and 2. If you didn't have the GameCube mag, if you didn't know what tea time was, if you didn't make sure that you had telepipes, you were playing it wrong. Phantasy Star was the game. And even though the split screen on it for 4 players basically turned your TV into this ridiculous... You'd have like... Oh god, the sections of the screen were so small that you could like hold up your phone to it. And your phone would probably be bigger. It was ridiculous, but we played it anyway because we had that in us. Over 100 levels of just Phantasy Star. Rest in peace, and I'll miss you always.
I had no idea what I was doing, but I was loving every minute of it. Later that year, a certain other MMO would release, World of Warcraft. Unfortunately, there was one issue.
What about Diablo?
I still had dial-up internet.
No Diablo? No
It would
Warcraft?
be a few years until I got out of dial-up hell. So in the meantime, the only way I could play World of Warcraft was either by playing at friend's house or sneaking the installation onto the school computers in the library, which I absolutely did. They were not very well managed at the time. I wouldn't hit max level in World of Warcraft until the tail end of Burning Crusade just before Wrath. But by then, World of Warcraft was the game that I played, and it would remain that way
Didn't
for
get into
several
WoW.
years until about halfway through my senior year of high school. That's when I got beta access to StarCraft II: Wings of Liberty. My friends and I
Okay.
were so hyped
StarCraft.
for this game, we spent every day in school in our computer class just playing StarCraft II. I fell in love with competitive gaming and esports because of StarCraft II. It was the first
No
game that I
Unreal
actually tried to play
Tournament?
competitively and work my way up a ranked ladder.
Bruh.
I would practice almost every day with friends, watch Day 9 and Husky videos.
I forgot about Unreal
aspirations to
Tournament.
go and
Yo,
pro.
that was on every
I only
computer
ever made it
on
to Plat, but getting to Plat felt incredible.
in like the
I
area
remember my
that I
friend
used to
and I
live
used
in.
to wake up at like 5 in the morning to watch the GSL. And in 2011, as a broke college student in Orlando, Florida, I bought a ticket to MLG using a literal bag of coins. But it was such an incredible experience. My friends and I got to meet all of our favorite players, Huck, In Control. We also got to meet Day 9, Husky, Artosis, and Tasteless. It would be my very first, and unfortunately, my very last live gaming event.
That's
And eventually,
unfortunate.
StarCraft 2 would give way to League of Legends, which a few years
Didn't get
later
into
gave
that.
way to Smite.
Didn't
which
get
would be
in.
the
I
last
tried to get
competitive
into
esport
that.
game that I played seriously. None of them really grabbed me in the same way that StarCraft 2 did, and I'm not sure any other competitive esport ever will.
His gaming history has some
This was
serious
about
holes
the
in
peak
it.
of gaming in my life. The best of it all came before, and I feel like I can pinpoint the exact year that the steep slope downward began. And that year was
Uh-oh.
2014.
Oh,
This was the
no.
year that StarCraft was all but dead. The year Warlords of Draenor came out, the first ever World of Warcraft expansion that I did not buy or play. This was the year Destiny released, and was a massive
That was
disappointment. This was the
that
year
was a
that
rough
Smite
year.
introduced loot boxes. This was
Uh,
the year that WildStar released and failed. And every year on from this point just seemed to be one big disappointment.
so for context, I'm pretty sure that was around the time where console games, if you didn't get them physically, you wouldn't get the piece of paper that let you activate the online mode. So like if you had let's see what game did this. Um, Fear 3 is one of them. Not the best example, but it's the only one that I can think of. It'd be a little piece of paper inside with a code on it. And if you wanted to do anything other than like the campaign, you had to enter that code in. And that was to kind of stop people from doing the used game thing with GameStop. And pretty much all of your notable PlayStation 3 games had this issue if they weren't from like Japan. And I want to say Xbox 360 did it too. I don't remember. I didn't have a 360 really. I got a PlayStation 3 and my buddy got the 360 so that we could kind of experience the best of both worlds. Um, Whenever we hung out, which was pretty much every day.
Disappointment after another. It felt more and more common for games to release unfinished or broken or have some predatory monetization.
Yep.
Every year seemed worse than the last.
Yep.
Gaming seemed different now.
Money. Oh, I've totally changed. That's not even a question.
The gaming industry has grown incredibly fast since I first picked up a controller. In fact, in 2021, the games industry raked in more cash than music and film combined. A good bit of this growth can be attributed to the rise of mobile gaming, which in 2021
Boo.
made up 45% of the total revenue in the industry. And of course, the stench of this heaping pile of cash would not go unnoticed by the insectoid swarm of C-suite executives, and with their grubby little shit-stained appendages and their Dunkus touch, they've pushed hard to make console and PC gaming monetization more closely resemble that of a mobile game, attempting to normalize all the same underhanded tactics which apply psychological manipulation in various ways to pry as much money as they can out of its users in a predatory manner. Whether it's feeding off of players' addictions by implementing gambling adjacent mechanics, or their frustration by creating problems and selling back the solutions, or FOMO with limited time buy now expensive skins. The online nature of the live service model has primed games for these sort of exploitations. It's not completely
Disgusting.
without pushback though, as we gamers have been successful in combating some of these changes, as is the case with
Some. Only some. We let things get way too far out of hand way too quickly. It's shameful. It's downright embarrassing. And we have nothing to celebrate over. There's no reason for us to celebrate winning one battle when we have completely and totally lost the war. Nothing is sacred anymore. Nothing. Not Final Fantasy, not Diablo, not World of Warcraft, not Call of Duty, not Medal of Honor. Nothing has been spared. If it exists as a game, there is some nonsensical business, microtransaction, money milking scheme tacked on.
loot boxes, as we've pretty much eradicated those from most PC and console games at this point. Though it definitely seems like a losing battle, as every year more ground gives way to the normalization
battle
of such strategies in like a one step forward, 10 step back kind of way. For example, if we look back, it wasn't that long ago when DLC was considered outrageous. It was seen as devs taking content out of the original game and holding it back to sell later. But as always, the ground gave way, and the conversation shifted to whether or not it was day one DLC or how much effort they put into the DLC.
Oh man, remember Street Fighter versus Tekken? With day one DLC that was on the disc. Ooh. Ooh. That's rough.
if the content was worth it. Fast forward to today, where similar conversations are being had about the pay-to-win debate.
A lot of
where at
Asmongold you
first,
got
any
there, buddy.
pay-to-win is completely unacceptable, to now being able to find conversations about how a certain game is not that pay-to-win. But complaining about monetization in games is nothing new or original. In fact, it's an oversaturated market, and at this point, just feels like beating a dead horse. It seems you'll never get enough people to care about this topic, and until that happens, nothing will change.
Like I was saying, you guys need to chill. You put the word new and game on anything, and it just seems like everybody just gets excited for it for no reason. Idiots.
Instead, I'd like to talk about a bit of a hot take here,
no.
that in the past 10 years, gaming really hasn't changed much at all. The gaming industry feels pretty stagnant. If I compare games as they are now to how I thought they would be by now as a kid, the picture is very disappointing. As a kid who just discovered MMOs like RuneScape and World of Warcraft, I was blown away by the idea of what MMOs could be in the future. I would hop off World of Warcraft and go play Dungeons & Dragons and think, man, one day World of Warcraft is going to have the same level of choice and consequence that I can have with my imagination playing D&D. Now obviously that hasn't happened yet, and as a kid I didn't know anything about game development. But I've heard a similar
Baldur's Gate
observation
3 is the
from
closest thing
Razvan
you're going to get to
in his
that.
video series Gaming for a Non-Gamer, which is a great series, and I recommend you check it out. Where
That
he
is a good
discusses
series.
his
Very
wife's
good videos.
disappointment discovering video games for the first time.
Her expectations for what she thought she could do in each game were always different than the reality, and I think as she realized that games were more simple than she had first assumed, some of the intrigue about them faded.
There's a massive lack of innovation and risk-taking in the AAA space, as we
Facts.
see games like Skyrim being released a billion times, The Last of Us is getting its third.
Here's the thing when it comes to AAA gaming, though. They don't exist or operate in order to innovate. They don't make new things. The purpose of AAA gaming at this current point in time is to uphold the status quo. They want to keep everything the same. They want to take something that's already been proven to work, and they want to hold on to it and milk it for as long as they possibly can. It's up to somebody else, non-AAA, usually indie, to innovate and develop something that's truly unique and new to the space. And that is when AAA industries will come in, pump it filled with money, and then try and drain that money back and more from the player base to recoup what they spent and make profit. That's the only way that AAA industry can move forward, is by taking something that a smaller developer has done, increasing the scale to a level that only their industry can, and then sitting on that idea until it is the oldest thing on the planet. You saw it with cover-based shooters. You saw it with battle royales. You saw it with MMOs. And now you're seeing it with live service games and stuff like battle passes. Every game has a battle pass. So if you're looking for innovation, the last place that you need to be looking is a AAA anything.
Third version of the game. Call of Duty ran out of ideas and decided to just loop back around and start re-releasing their games in order again, hoping nobody
And it
would
hasn't
notice.
stopped
They somehow
working.
made all the games worse, so everyone noticed.
Yeah,
Which
everyone
brings me to
noticed,
my
but
next
everyone
point,
kept
where
buying it.
Not only are companies not really interested in innovating at all, but they seem to be actively taking steps backwards in innovation. If you look at something like the original Fallout's super in-depth dialogue system versus Fallout 4's dialogue system, it's a huge step back. And that's a tame example. It gets so much worse. Blizzard, for example, figured out that they could retroactively ruin a 20-year-old game with Warcraft 3 Reforged. Well, I guess that was
Diablo
pretty
2.
innovative. The only real innovations coming out of this industry are coming from indie developers and modders, the latter of which is responsible for the two biggest genres in the past decade, and that's without even the expectation of getting paid. Isn't that weird? Kind of goes against the conventional capitalist thinking, huh? Looking at the trajectory of the industry, it's really hard to not just be depressed about it all. And
okay, so I'm not crazy at least.
Course correct.
It has. People have started to settle.
Things like YouTube, Reddit, and all these other social media sites haven't really been around that long. And yet it's sometimes hard to remember what it was like before they existed. These sites have made data mining, crowdsourced information, and video guides all accessible to everyone at all times. In some cases, the internet will have every bit of information about every mechanic and secret in a given game before they even release. And all of these things have drastically changed how we play video games. Let's take a look at a game like World
I
of
don't know about
Warcraft.
that.
If I had to describe how I feel playing retail WoW in one word, it would be emptiness. Not because of a lack of content necessarily, so much as the game just kind of feels soulless. Where before, the game was about adventure and discovery, it is instead now a game about optimization. It's essentially
Sure.
a solved game where add-ons and logs have optimized gameplay to a T with little room for experimentation or creativity.
So the reason that MMOs feel like games about optimization, a lot of MMOs have this problem, not just World of Warcraft, is because that when people approach an MMO for the first time, they're not looking at it as a new world to explore. They're looking at it as I want to skip to the end game and do content where with everyone else. You see, and that's the problem. People are forgetting that part of the MMO experience is like the whole game and not just the very end of it. So when you have that sort of mentality with new players, that's when you get those people who are only interested in blitzing through to get to the quote unquote good content or the content that they think that they're interested in, and they'll disregard everything else. That's why MMOs feel soulless and empty these days, because people don't care about getting to know the world and the characters that are in it. No, they just want to skip to the raid because that's the footage that they saw where everybody looked really cool and cool stuff was happening. It's also one of the reasons why it's so frustrating for people who do want that sense of adventure, that sense of exploration, to sort of fill out the world. It's frustrating for them because they're they're a minority and they're surrounded with people who only care about one single aspect about a game that has so much more to offer. And when they try and tell people to slow it down or maybe experience some more of what the game has to offer, they get told that, well, I you play your way, I play my way, type of thing. And ultimately that just makes the game worse for everyone. World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, Elder Scrolls Online, Terra even, it's a problem. And unfortunately, it's not even the type of problem that a video game developer can solve. It's the type of problem that has to change in us, the players, and the way that we look at things like MMOs. The reason we play them. It's one of the reasons why I think that Genshin Impact is so popular, is because there really isn't any sort of end game. I mean, I guess there technically is, but the focus on the game is obviously the gacha. And if you don't want to spend money on the gacha, then you have to explore the game. You can't just skip through story and do the same raids over and over again and think you're going to unlock characters. No, you don't have a choice. There's a gun to your head that says you either explore every inch of this map or you're not getting any more characters. But the Genshin Impact isn't really an MMO, although it probably could have been, now that I think about it.
Which is fine. I mean, no one likes to play suboptimally. I'm not trying to vilify optimization, as it can be quite fun for some people. Take speedrunning, for example. Speedrunning is such an interesting hobby to me. It's something I've always wanted to get into, but I've always felt a little intimidated by. The stuff that people are able to achieve with speedrunning is truly mind-blowing. Some of which is only really possible because of the interconnected nature of modern gaming, where sharing glitches and exploits is part of the fun of collectively iterating on runs to shave off more and more time. But then
I
if
can
you
agree
look
with
at
that.
something like RuneScape, one of the most solved games that has become literally all about the optimization, you'll find a community who's made it a tradition of coming up with off-the-wall challenges and restrictions inflicted upon their accounts, also known as snowflake accounts, so that they are forced to forge their own path. There's no guide to follow on how to clear one of the hardest raids in old school RuneScape if you're not allowed to leave the swamp zone. But one man, after 3 years of theory crafting, grinding, and 33 very entertaining YouTube videos, was able to accomplish that goal, with hundreds and thousands of people watching and loving it. So clearly, the problem for World of Warcraft isn't just optimization itself. It's that optimization isn't just confined to the few who enjoy it, but instead sort of forced onto everyone else. With all
Right,
these
exactly.
tools available to everyone and things like Raider.io assigning public completion scores, everyone is expected to be fully optimized or not play the game. Because again, no one likes to play suboptimally. ignorance truly is bliss. It's my opinion that this is the real reason why World of Warcraft has been struggling. Like Asmongold has said, Blizzard has ignored the casual audience and failed to produce fun and compelling activities
A
that
lot of
aren't just about
MMO
the
developers
optimization.
ignore the casual
Instead, they just
audience.
continue to double down.
How many times have I seen a live letter from Final Fantasy XIV where everyone pretty much ignores everything except what new raid is going to get added and when? So that they can call off of work and work on their world first progression. If I were to ask several people what the names of the starting NPCs in the various towns were, I'm pretty sure nobody would know. Well, they might know one of them, but while that might seem relatively irrelevant, I don't know. It just feels like MMOs these days, they only make the ladder longer and they never make the ladder wider. So people are only worried about getting to the end of the ladder as quick as they possibly can.
On the raids and dungeons, catering to this nature of gameplay. Now, as of this recording, Dragonflight has not released yet, so maybe that will be the expansion that fixes this issue. But it's not just retail. A lot of players were excited about Classic and logged in expecting to recapture that nostalgic sense of adventure.
They
But
didn't.
things are too different now. The way we play games is too different now. The game didn't seem nearly as hard as they remembered, the world not as vast. But I think it comes down to the fact that every facet of the game has been solved already, and that the joy of the original release lied in the discovery and the journey. Now, this is not everyone's opinion. There's still plenty of people that very much enjoyed Classic. This is mostly
Sure.
just anecdotal sentiment from me and my friends. But I do think that this might be why so many people get excited whenever a new MMO is released. It's a chance to discover things for the first time, to not be beholden to the methods and builds that someone else already figured out and everyone is expected to use. A chance for you to be the one that discovers those methods. But, for better or for worse, this is just the way the world is now. Maybe someday a game will come out that is immune to this phenomenon. A game that can't be solved, where the discovery never goes away. Doesn't seem possible, but who knows? Maybe someday.
I'd like to issue a challenge to MMO developers. And I specifically mean ones that where the MMO is already out. I think that it would be the most interesting thing on the planet if World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy or the Elder Scrolls Online had a huge content update, and absolutely none of it was for max level players. None of it. All of the content is stuff for low level players, mid level players, mid game. Adding stuff like more areas to discover, more side quests to do, maybe some dungeons or something. I think that that would be absolutely fascinating. Expand the world outward instead of forward. I think that that would be the coolest thing on the planet. Here we go. I mean,
I don't feel like a different person. I feel like I always have been and always will be me. But I've changed my mind and opinions on a lot of things in the past 10 years. Growing up and dealing with adult responsibilities can be really stressful. You're faced with a lot of change and uncertainty, and it can be
Sure.
really easy to succumb to worry and regret. But worry and regret are just a waste of time. Time that could be better spent having fun. You know, people
Sure.
say video games are a waste of time, but personally, I think that having fun and enjoying your life is the best way to spend your time. But what do you
Factual.
do if you no longer enjoy your favorite hobby? With this fog hanging over my head, I began reminiscing on how I used to enjoy games. I used to spend countless hours grinding the ladder in StarCraft 2, working on refining builds.
I have a tip for anybody who feels this way. If you're worried that this is happening to you, go back. Go back. Nostalgia goggles are very dangerous. Clouding your vision with memories of the past can be a detriment to how you progress into the future. But in this instance, I would say that game that you always compare new games to, that old game that you compare new games to, go back and play it. If you still enjoy it the same way that you did when you played it back then you're okay. But if you go back and you realize that it's not quite the same thing, or you dislike it, or you're not able to enjoy it the same way that you did back then, that's when you have the problem. That's how you know that you have changed and it isn't just everything else. I do that every now and then, where it's like, am I completely incapable of just feeling joy? Am I just a broken individual now? And then I'll go back and I'll play, Blue Burst, Phantasy Star Online. I'll go back and I'll play Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy III, an old Dead or Alive game, and I will have a blast. I will have a ton of fun, and I'll go, nope, I'm still good.
Builds, seeing small improvements over time, making quantifiable progress in a skill feels so good. The dopamine. But today, if you asked me to play just about any competitive game, I could not be fucking bothered. I haven't played League of Legends in like 9 years, but I booted it up a couple of months ago. My friends were telling me about all the new champions, and the new metas, and the new builds, and I just wanted to go take a nap. Is it because my attention span is shot? Is the lack of elasticity in my rotting brain protesting against me trying to shove even more useless shit into it? Maybe both. I used to have the drive to spend hours learning everything I could about a new game. There were times where all I could think about was whatever game I was currently playing, thinking about what I wanted to accomplish next, how I was going to do it, and I wouldn't stop until I finished. Nowadays, I'd be lucky to stick with a game for more than a couple weeks before I'm over it, regardless of if I actually finished it or not. So then, are there
Also,
any
they need
games
to
that I
stop making
do
games so
enjoy?
dang
After
long.
so many disappointing letdowns and trying to enjoy games that just start to annoy me after 2 weeks, this question legitimately crossed my mind. And at the peak of my jadedness, one game proved to me that I did still indeed have the capacity to fall in love with the game. And that
There
game
you
was
go.
Valheim. A game that isn't even finished yet, but a
Interesting.
game that so perfectly created a sense of adventure and discovery that it reminded me why I love gaming to begin with.
You should go check
So it
out
seems there
Dragon's
may
Dogma.
still be remnants of a gamer deep underneath all the jadedness. I've proven to myself that I definitely haven't outgrown the hobby. Maybe I've just been playing the wrong games. And sure,
Yeah.
the world is different, and the way we play games is different, but there's still fun to be had. And despite the industry's best efforts to cannibalize itself, there will always be passionate indie developers and modders to pick up the slack and make good games and experiences. And maybe
Okay,
that's
hold on a
enough.
second. So, indie developers, that's great. We love indie developers. I wish that they would stop making Metroidvanias, but that's another conversation for another time. Modders. I like the attempt that modders will put in hours of work and effort to quote unquote fix a game or make it better. But it has gotten to the point now where developers will put out unfinished, half-baked garbage and just assume that modders will come along and fix everything that they didn't. Bethesda has put out trash for years. I don't care how you feel about it. Their games have been garbage for a very long time. But they have been getting a piggyback ride on the backs of modders. People don't like Bethesda games. People like people who mod Bethesda games. There isn't a single Bethesda game since Oblivion that I would ever play vanilla. Those games need mods. And I think that that's pathetic. I think that that is absolutely pathetic. And it's gotten to the point now where I'm not searching for games based off of their own merit. My search is filled with insert game title here mods. Just so I can see, okay, if the game is bad, to what degree is it moddable? I had to mod Resident Evil 4 Remake. I had to mod Skyrim. I had to mod Fallout 4. I have to mod this. I have to mod Lethal Company. I'm sick and tired of having to install a band-aid to a problem that developers just couldn't be bothered to fix in their own game. I have to pay them and then go and do extra work to make the game that I actually want to play. No. No. I'm getting to the point where I'm done with that. Where it's like, if I have to install more than 3 mods in order to enjoy your game, then your game is not worth a dime.
Well, it kind of has to be enough. But I'm determined to rekindle my love of gaming. And that will be my New Year's resolution. I will begin my search to find the fun.
Good luck. Good luck. I think we all kind of have that. This was a good video. Not really a whole lot to learn from it, but there are a lot of points here that just make a lot of sense. And hopefully people see this and think about it the next time that somebody gives them a very polished turd with a high price tag on it. I really do hope that you'll consider it, because I think it's our fault. I think that it's our fault that things are the way they are, and our lack of restraint. But let me know what you think about it down in the comments below. Again, I'll have this video linked in the description, and I hope to see you all in another video.